لن تنالوا البر حتى تنفقوا مما تحبون وما تنفقوا من شيء فإن الله به عليم رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي فالحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد الأنبياء والمرسلين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين ثم أما بعد السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Inshallah ta'ala, we're starting the fourth juz today, which is still a continuation of Surah Aal-e-Imran, and we're still very much in the middle of the conversation that has to do with the address to the people of the book. Later on in this surah, now there's going to be a transition, and we're going to start a commentary. Probably we'll start that today, a commentary about the Battle of Uhud and some things that have to do with that. But until we get there, we're still in the middle of the conversation that was previously continuing. This has a lot of parallels with what we covered in Surah Al-Baqarah about the people of the book being encouraged not to be reluctant in accepting this message and not hiding what's become manifest and what's become clear to them, and not assuming that they're going to have some kind of case with Allah, and as a result they don't have to really see the urgency of accepting Islam, etc. And in that light, the conversation is continuing in this very famous and very beautiful ayah. And it also completes and reviews something that was covered in Surah Al-Baqarah. In Surah Al-Baqarah, we saw the ayah of Al-Bir. لَيْسَ الْبِرَّ أَن تُوَلُّوا وُجُوهَكُمْ. It is not goodness alone, or it's not the only thing that's good, that you turn your faces eastward and westward. We saw that ayah and we had a long discussion about it. Now, it's a review of that lesson from another point of view. Allah Azza wa Jalla says, لَن تَنَالُوا الْبِرَّ, you will not reach goodness. لَن تَنَالُوا الْبِرَّ, none of you will reach goodness. Now if you keep the conversation connected to what came before, يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا has been mentioned already, and يَا أَهْلَ الْكِتَابِ has been mentioned already. People of the book and those of you who have iman. So when you say لَن تَنَالُوا, it's the second person, none of you will reach. That none of you could include the believers, and it could include disbelievers. So we have to appreciate both of those perspectives before we go forward. For a disbeliever, for a member of the people of the book, for them to accept Islam, they're going to have to give up a lot of things. They're going to have to sacrifice a lot of things. And infaq essentially is the act of sacrifice. It's the act of spending something that you have. So they're going to have to make a lot of strides to come to Islam. And they will not reach that kind of goodness. That goodness will not happen until they're ready to give up what they really are in love with. For a believer, the believer is also being told, just because you're in Islam does not mean you've attained goodness. That's a really powerful lesson also. Just because you're people of Iman, you're the followers of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that does not mean you've become good people necessarily. The test of goodness is not that you've accepted Islam, the test of goodness is what's coming here. Now to parallel this and to tie to what we studied in Surah Al-Baqarah, if you notice in Surah Al-Baqarah, لَيْسَ الْبِرَّ أَن تُوَلُّوا وُجُوهَكُمْ قِبَلَ الْمَشْرِقِ وَالْمَغْرِبِ وَلَكِنَّ الْبِرَّ مَنْ آمَنَ بِاللَّهِ وَالْيَوْمِ الْآخِرِ وَالْمَلَائِكَةِ وَالْكِتَابِ وَالنَّبِيِّينَ. The first item of goodness was faith, and after faith, fundamentally what we were dealing with was spending. That was the heaviest chunk that it took. There are several items mentioned, but the biggest one was spending. وَآتَ الْمَالَ عَلَى حُبِّهِ ذَوِي الْقُرْبَى وَالْيَتَامَى وَالْمَسَاكِينَ وَابْنَ السَّبِيلِ وَالسَّائِلِينَ وَفِي الرِّقَابِ. All of that is spending. And then it came again, وَآتَ الزَّكَاةَ, after وَأَقَامَ الصَّلَاةَ وَآتَ الزَّكَاةَ. So spending took a huge chunk of goodness in that ayah. It took a lot of real estate to just discuss that one thing. So here again Allah says you will not reach goodness. And I won't repeat in detail at least what bir means. And not just goodness, because good is in Arabic khair, right? لَن تَنَالُوا الْخَيْرِ. But bir is also safety. You won't be safe and stable in your goodness, because it's tied to the idea of bar. Bar means land, right? As opposed to the ocean, which is unstable. حَتَّى تُنْفِقُوا, until you spend, all of you spend, مِمَّا تُحِبُّونَ, from what you love. That min is such a mercy from Allah. In مِمَّا تُحِبُّونَ. If you read, لَن تَنَالُوا الْبِرَّ حَتَّى تُنْفِقُوا مَا تُحِبُّونَ. مَا تُحِبُّونَ. You won't reach goodness until you spend what you love. That means everything we spend we have to sacrifice. Allah didn't ask for that. He asked for a portion. مِمَّا تُحِبُّونَ. From the things you love, you should be spending. This is a review again of something that was discussed in detail in Surah Al-Baqarah. وَلَسْتُمْ بِآخِذِيهِ إِلَّا أَن تُغْمِضُوا فِيهِ. Don't spend something, وَلَا تَيَمُّمُوا الْخَبِيثَ مِنْهُ تُنْفِقُونَ. Don't give up the filthy things that you own and you're going to spend those. And if those were ever handed to you, you would like squint your eyes before you took them. You'd be disgusted in taking them. Don't be like that. The things you spend should be the things that you love. So let's just, put it in contemporary context. You have a garage sale. Or the masjid has like a giveaway, right? A lot of churches around, Christmas and Thanksgiving, they do giveaways. And people bring their old sweaters and toys and, computers and things like that. And they leave it in the church and people can just take them and stuff. It's usually leftover stuff. It's not the stuff that's still in the box and it's still gift wrapped and it's brand new, etc. Right? You might go there and maybe get yourself a VHS, VCR or something, right? That's what you might end up getting. So, or a jean jacket from the 80s or something. Right? But when Muslims are going to give, they're going to give the stuff that they love. The stuff that's closest to their heart. So for instance, like as a parent teaching their children, I'll get my kids like Eid presents, and then they'll have to give one of them up. And I'll literally ask them, what's your favorite one? And then, okay, let's just see if we can give that in sadaqah. It's a test of giving. Nobody likes to do it. Because obviously, to test that is a test of love. What do you love more? Giving it up for Allah more, or, you love of keeping it? And that's a natural test that Allah Azza wa Jal puts before us when He talks about giving. Now, the other thing is infaq, is in assets, al-mal, assets, wealth. So you could think of it as physical wealth, like material goods you own, real estate, money, investments, etc. But there's another asset that all of us own that's actually even more worthy than the material assets themselves, and that asset is time. Right? Time is probably the most important asset that is in our possession. And we're constantly spending it, whether we're asleep or awake. We're constantly engaged in spending that asset, either on ourselves, or on nothing, or on something useful, or on building but we're spending it. There's no way around that. And the best opportunity, the best use of your time is when you have the most energy to do something with that time. That's your youth, right? So when a person gets old, as we speak, you have a grandfather. He's also spending the same hours and seconds and minutes that you are. But your grandfather and your grandmother don't have the energy, don't have the health, don't have the resources to do what you're able to do at the same time. Their abilities have diminished. Time has eaten away at their capabilities. But time hasn't done that with you yet, right? So when Allah asks for spending of what we love, spending out of what we love, one of the first things Muslims should definitely think about, and especially youth, because you know what young people feel all the time? They got time. I got time. I've got a couple of years ahead of me. Or it's a long weekend. I'll get around to studying. Or I'll get around to this or that. You always feel like you have time. And you'd rather spend that time like Friday night is party night. The weekend is, it's time where you could just sleep in late or whatever. People feel like they've got more time. But this is also a really powerful lesson for how we spend our time. You have to give up. You have to spend out of what you love. That sleep that you love is also time that you spend. It's also an asset that you wasted, right? That extra sleep. Give it up for Allah Azza wa Jal. حَتَّى تُنْفِقُوا مِمَّا تُحِبُّونَ. By the way, all of you better have the mushafs open in front of you as we're reading. Because this is the way you remember the vocabulary. Okay, as you just hear it being explained and you see the word in front of you, it sticks in your mind, the meanings. وَمَا تُنْفِقُوا مِنْ شَيْءٍ. And whatever you might spend. See, the مَا تُنْفِقُوا doesn't have a noon at the end. مَا تُنْفِقُونَ. Right? And ma is not from the adawat al-jazm or nasab, not a typical one anyway. But when it does do that, when ma does take away the noon from tunfiquna, it implies whatever you might have spent, or whatever you might even spend, if it may even occur, from anything, min shay'in, فَإِنَّ اللَّهَ بِهِ عَلِيمٌ, then certainly Allah is completely aware, fully knowledgeable, especially of that which you spent. فَإِنَّ اللَّهَ بِهِ عَلِيمٌ. Now interestingly, Allah didn't say here, وَمَا تُنْفِقُوا مِنْ خَيْرٍ. That occurred in Baqarah also. وَمَا تُنْفِقُوا مِنْ خَيْرٍ فَإِنَّ اللَّهَ بِهِ عَلِيمٌ. Here He says, وَمَا تُنْفِقُوا مِنْ شَيْءٍ فَإِنَّ اللَّهَ بِهِ عَلِيمٌ. Whatever you spent of anything, Allah knows. What this does, the difference between whatever good you spent or whatever you spent, there's a difference between these two things. Whatever good you spent, Allah knows about it, means you don't have to tell anybody else. Allah knows you spent on a good cause and you did something good with that money. Then it's, you don't have to remind anybody or put a record of it or whatever. Allah has that record. Allah knows about it. But shay adds another dimension to that conversation in addition. And that is, Allah knows the quality of what you spent. It may not even have been good. Maybe you did give in charity, but the monies you earned weren't permissible themselves to begin with. The money you earned was questionable. So what you spent, the quality of it, maybe the act of spending you've counted, you've got the non-profit organization tax exempt receipt or whatever. So you've got a record that you spent, but the quality of it, Allah knows fully. What monies you spent and where you spent them and what intentions were behind them. فَإِنَّ اللَّهَ بِهِ عَلِيمٌ كُلُّ الطَّعَامِ كَانَ حِلًّا لِبَنِي إِسْرَائِيلَ. Now the conversation continues, because when you deal with righteousness, then you also have to deal with false perceptions of righteousness, right? So now we're transitioning from what real righteousness is supposed to be, rooted in sacrifice, to what sometimes religious traditions turn into righteousness. And this is something I'm generalizing, even though it's talking about Bani Israel. I'm generalizing because we're no exception. Muslims can suffer this also. What I mean by this is, over time, what you have left a lot of times in religions is not the essence or the spirit of the religion. What you have left is the skeletal structure, the outside facade of the religion. To give you an image of that, sometimes you have a tree, right? On the outside you see a bark, you see branches, you see leaves, etc. That's a massive tree. But it may be that there are termites that have eaten away from the inside the essence of that tree, and the roots have become weak and frail. And it's just a matter, and you see this huge tree, but the bark is empty, there's nothing inside. But on the outside it looks impressive, it looks like a large tree. It may be that a building looks very impressive on the outside, but the foundations have rotted, and there's humidity inside, and it's cracked, and it's about to collapse, but on the outside it looks like it's just fine, it's totally fine. Just like that in religion, you know what happens? People take certain attributes of religion, certain aspects of religion, and they give them a lot of importance. Usually those are the aspects of religion that have to do with what people can see. Whether it has to do with clothing, whether it has to do with acts of worship, expressions, things that are said, things that are observable among each other. We give a lot of importance to those things, and I'm not saying they're not important, but I'm saying that's all that's left sometimes. And the essence of the religion is lost. So the essence is mentioned first. You have to be a person that spends from what they love. And so what is left? Now, what happened in specifically with Bani Israel was, again, I'm reminding you, Israel is the other name for Yaqub. So when we call them the sons of Israel, what we're saying is the sons of Jacob, the sons of Yaqub alayhi salam. Allah reminds us, كُلُّ الطَّعَامِ كَانَ حِلًّا لِبَنِي إِسْرَائِيل. All kinds of food was actually permissible for the sons of Israel. Now we know some things were made haram on them. Yes? But how come Allah says all kinds of food was halal for Bani Israel? This is actually very important to understand. That language is not the same as science and mathematics. You know, a husband says to the wife, I gave you everything. You still treat me like this. That does not mean he gave her everything. Because she says, no, you didn't give me everything. Look at that store and all the merchandise still in there. You didn't give me that. Or somebody says, I gave you the sun and the moon. No, you didn't. Right? They're still there. These are expressions that you have to understand in a context. You have to understand them in a context. Well, it says all kinds of food, all food was made halal on Bani Israel means there were so many things halal on them. The way to express that is all kinds of stuff. I've tried everything possible to help you. Everything possible? No, well, not everything possible, but all things that could have been. So you have to understand them in that texture, these expressions. And this is also illustrating how few things are haram. That's the beauty of kullu ta'am. It's like everything is halal, and it's like you might find a speck in the horizon. Oh, okay, don't touch that. Here's this one tree you don't go near. Right? Kullu ta'ami kana hillan li bani Israel. Had been halal, had been permissible, hillan. And interestingly, rhetorically, there's a difference between halal and hil. Halal and hil. Hil is actually easier to pronounce than halal. Right? So it's the abbreviated form of the word halal, which means it was made easily solvable, easily permissible. It wasn't some rigorous process after which it became permissible. It was just easy for them to have permissibility in so many things for the sons of Israel. إِلَّا مَا حَرَّمَ إِسْرَائِيلُ عَلَى نَفْسِهِ. Except for what Israel, meaning Jacob, Yaqub alayhi salam, himself, حَرَّمَ إِسْرَائِيلُ, means haram. Israel made haram, Yaqub made haram, عَلى نَفْسِهِ, on himself. What that means is he didn't like certain things. So halal and haram is something else. Your personal preferences are something else. look, Allah Azza wa Jalla has made certain things permissible, but they still might not be a good idea for you. They might not be. Peanuts are halal, but you might be allergic to them. Isn't that true? So they're haram on you. Not from a religious point of view, you're going to die. Right? There are some people so allergic to peanuts, if they even see them, they start flipping out. Right? So that may be the case with you. Something's permissible, but it's still not good for you. It's just your personal preference. So Yaqub alayhi salam didn't like, the narrations tell us, didn't like camel meat. He didn't like it. It's not that camel meat's haram, but he just didn't like it. So what happens over time out of allegiance to Israel? They made an observation, our father, Israel, did not like camel meat. That must mean that is from Revelation, so they made it haram. So over time in the fiqh, in the jurisprudence of the Israelites, camel meat became impermissible. Okay, it was no longer kosher. Okay, so then Allah Azza wa Jalla says, this was just his own preference. Relax. And actually, this was the danger. If that was something they did with Israel, this danger represents itself 100 times more strongly in our allegiance to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Because if he says he's going to stop eating something or not do something, then what might we do immediately? Well, it's haram, right? So that danger was there. So Allah addressed that danger later on in the Quran. لِمَا تُحَرِّمُ مَا أَحَلَّ اللَّهُ لَكَ. The Prophet ﷺ, for a personal, domestic reason, stops eating honey, taking honey. And Allah reveals an ayah, why do you make haram what Allah has made halal for you? In other words, it's not just that, it's a personal matter, it's not really a big deal, but it is a big deal when the messenger does it. Because if the messenger stops drinking honey or taking honey, what are those companions going to understand from that? You can't, that must be haram. So he has to be really careful every step he takes, even in his personal life. Alayhi salatu wasalam. Even in his personal life. Now to a much lesser extent, that is what happens in a religion when it starts deteriorating and people lose touch with the original teachings and the original sources. When overall people lose touch with that, you know what they do? They take their religion from religious leaders. Not even from what they say, from what they do. So if a religious leader is doing something, it must be halal. And if a religious leader is not doing something, it must be haram. And that, even if he doesn't say it that way, it just becomes that. That becomes the sociology of a religious people. And it's a very problematic, kind of sentiment or a concept to become widespread in a society. So Allah Azza wa Jalla addresses it here. And this, by the way, becomes their righteousness. This becomes their righteousness. Actually, just a couple of days ago, we got an email. Somebody had a real problem that we don't say Maulana Abdul Nasir because it's not respectful enough, and you're supposed to. It's almost like if we don't do this, then all is lost. Then what do we have left in our religion if we don't have Maulana Abdul Nasir, right? But there are some, and I respect the sentiment. He wants to show respect to a scholar, but when that's all that's left, and when that becomes equated with the essentials of the religion, then there's a psychological problem. There's a problem in understanding that becomes widespread. Anyhow, so min qabli an tunazzala Tawrat, much before the Tawrat was even sent down. This is way before Israel had a problem with camel meat, and he didn't eat it for his own personal preferences. Qul, tell them, fa'tu bit Tawrati, go ahead, bring the Tawrat. Bring Tawrat, fatluha, and go read it directly. Don't tell me what it says, come bring it. Put it in front of you and read it. Put it in front of me and read it. In kuntum sadiqeen, and if in fact you are telling the truth.